Hello and welcome to the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. It's another sick episode, so I might sound a bit weird, and if you missed last week's episode, we looked at a Hunter's Mask, a Rotten Egg, and a Chicken Tree Pun, among many other cards. To start us off this episode, we're looking at a Totem Eeeh, 1 mana 2/2 Shaman Legendary Totem with Overload 2 and the Death Rattle. Add this minion to your basic totem pool. So 1 mana 2/2 is pretty decent, Overload is a bit of a drag, but the Death Rattle is the really powerful part about this card. After this Death Rattle activates, when you use your Shaman hero power, you now have a 1/5 chance to get a 2/2. And with how the hero power works, if you already have one of the totems, you can't get it again. So if you don't get a Totem Eeeh with your first attempt, you now have a 1/4 chance of getting it. And I don't have to tell you that getting this 2/2 would be better than basically all of the other options. But what's really crazy is each time you summon a Totem Eeeh and the Death Rattle activates, it's going to add more copies to your basic totem pool, which means you're going to be more likely to get it. Then basically every turn you're going to summon a 2/2. What's really interesting about this card is you could also play the Undertaker and actually gain this Death Rattle, which means once the Undertaker dies, it will be added to your hero power pool. And just a reminder, when you would summon this with your hero power, it wouldn't activate the battle cry, so the Undertaker wouldn't have the Death Rattle effect. It would just have pretty nice stats. And you could take this even a step further, play Shudderwock to gain the Undertaker's battle cry, and then when Shudderwock dies, it would also add to the pool of your hero power. And so, you might be thinking that a 2 mana hero power that allows you to summon an 8/5 or a 6/6 might be a little bit overpowered. And yeah, that would be overpowered, but the hero power still includes the basic totem pool, so you're not even guaranteed to get those. On top of this, you have to draw a lot of different legendaries and play them in a certain order for you to improve your hero power this way. It would be a really slow and inconvenient process. Still, I think this is kind of an interesting concept, some sort of control deck where the entire goal is to continue to improve your hero power. Personally, I think that would be more interesting than Baku or Gen. Whether a Totem Eeeh was just played by itself to improve the hero power, or it was comboed with the Undertaker or Shudderwock, I think it could be the start for a new, interesting type of deck for Shaman. Next up is Auctioneer Fink, 6 mana 5/5 neutral legendary with the battle cry, add a bid spell to your hand. And bid reads, give this to your opponent, it costs 1 more. At the end of your turn, discard this and equip a 6/2 weapon with lifesteal for your opponent. So the idea with this card is you're bidding against your opponent on which one of you is going to give the other the weapon. Auctioneer Fink is more like a 7-drop because you're going to play the minion and then you're going to want to play the spell right away. It starts off at 1 mana on your turn, 2 mana on your opponent's turn, 3 mana on yours, etc, etc. It could get all the way up to 10 mana in your opponent's hand, and if they chose to play it, then it would go back to you and it would cost 11 mana. Good luck paying that one. This sort of auction would really change up the game pace, because when playing the bid card, you're paying mana, and that could mess up your opponent's tempo and prevent both of you from playing a lot of cards. An extra 1, 2, or 3 mana here and there doesn't matter too much in the late game, but it could definitely change how both players approach their turn. And then when you start getting up to 6 mana and more, it will really change the pace of the game. Depending on each player's situation, they're going to have to evaluate whether spending the amount of mana bid costs is going to be worth preventing their opponent from getting a weapon. And even aggressive decks are going to want to buy into bid, because if you give your opponent the weapon, they're going to be able to heal for 12 with that lifesteal. It would be a really good card to test the skill of both players and to see how each would approach the situation. Definitely a cool card. Next up, we have T the Dumpster Diver, 5 mana 3/2 legendary Shaman Murloc. With the battle cry, draw the cards you mulliganed away. So whatever cards you get at the start of the game, you have to decide which ones you want to mulligan away and thus draw with T later on, and those you want to keep in your opening hand. Honestly, for just drawing the mulligan cards, I think this card is a little bit too expensive. And also, I think it would be more interesting if instead of drawing the cards, you added copies of it. The game's opening cards are random from your deck anyway, so you don't have much control over what you get. Also, if they were copies, I think it would be more interesting because there could be some cards like Prince Keleseth you would want to keep in your opening hand, but if you mulligan them, you could get more value with T the Dumpster Diver later on. If this is going to be 5 mana, I want to make it worth the value. I also think a card like this would be much more interesting in Shaman, as opposed to the one sort of similar in Mage. There's wackier cards, more room for memes, and yeah, maybe having 2 Shutterwalks would be a bit of a pain, but the effect is still so random that it's not consistently going to be overpowered value. Personally, I'd change the card to make it so it added a copy of those mulligan cards to your hand, and even then, who knows if Shaman would be able to take advantage of this card. Next up is Civilian Rioters, 1 mana 0/3 neutral minion that reads characters with 0 attack can attack. Well, will you look at that, an egg activator. At only 1 mana, this is a really nice little combo piece where maybe you have an egg or some sort of other 0 attack minion out on the board. After you wait a turn for that 0 attack minion to get rid of their summoning sickness, you could play Civilian Rioter and trade that 0 attack minion into an enemy minion, not dealing any damage, but killing your minion and activating the Death Rattle. It's not the strongest Death Rattle activator, but it's a neutral card that any class could use. But it's not just minions, because characters also includes your hero. By default, your hero has 0 attack, so if you were trying to get rid of a 0 attack weapon, have your hero take some damage, or buff Hench Clan Thug, then Civilian Rioters could be a card to use. It would definitely be a niche and situational card. Even with some 2-card combos, it's still pretty weak on its own. Definitely an interesting concept. Next up is Zolo Soulbinder, 9 mana for 10 legendary priest minion with lifesteal, and Battlecry, force all enemy minions to attack this one. So on turn 9, you could play this card, and your opponent could have a full board of Murlocs, and it would force those Murlocs to attack into this one, each time dealing 4 damage and healing your hero for 4. Against a bunch of small minions, it would heal you for quite a bit. So this card is removal, heal, and if it survives, a minion. This makes the card super flexible and powerful. I think whether or not this card would see play relies heavily on the meta. If opponents are playing Odd Paladin and Priest can survive till turn 9, then this is a great option. But if they're playing something like Big Priest, then maybe this doesn't work as well. Interesting idea, I think it's really powerful, but I wonder if the card stats would be able to hold up to all the enemy minions attacking it. Next up is the Stem Project, a shaman quest that requires you to transform 8 minions into other minions, and your reward is Xeris the Transmogrifier. This is a 5 mana hero card where each turn this is in your hand, transform it into a random hero card. The Stem Project isn't your traditional quest. You can complete the quest pretty easily with the Stormbringer and Unstable Evolution. It might cost you a decent amount of mana, but you don't really have to build your entire deck around it. I'm really hoping that at the start of the next Hearthstone year, and when the new expansion comes out, that they're going to print at least one new quest. I feel like quests still have a lot to offer from the game, and they could go in a lot of unique directions. The Stem Project would definitely be a fun one to see. And last up is Skilled Paladin. 4 mana 4/2 Paladin minion with the Death Rattle, add a copy of this minion as a weapon to your hand. That would give you Skilled Hammer, which is a 4 mana 4/2 weapon. With the Death Rattle, add a copy of this weapon as a spell to your hand. And that gives you the final iteration Skilled Spell, which deals 4 damage and gains you 2 armor. So the idea with this card is you only have to include 1 card in your deck, but you're able to get the value out of 3. Unlike Echo, where you need to use all the value in 1 turn, this would be spread out over multiple turns after the Death Rattles are activated. And unlike a card like Elise the Trailblazer, you wouldn't have to wait as long for the value. You could basically play one of the new cards every turn. And so looking at these 3 different stages, the minion Skilled Paladin is a pretty weak card. Definitely understated, and having only 2 health means your opponent would easily be able to get rid of this. But I think this is made up for with Skilled Hammer, which for only 4 mana allows you to deal 4 damage right away, and then upon the next turn deal even more. It's not a bad hammer. And that leads you to Skilled Spell, which is a pretty decent spell. None of these cards are really that exceptional, but you're continuing to add cards to your hand, which means you don't necessarily have to draw more cards in order to keep your hand full of value. This is something that basically any deck could use. Skilled Paladin would only work in a controlling deck, just trying to squeeze as much value as they could. The 3 cards are all hovering around average, but if you have the mana to spend, then it's pretty good value. Alright, those were the top custom Hearthstone cards of this week. Make sure to check out last week's episode if you didn't. I got a whole playlist of all of the episodes, and there should be a new misunderstood cards video coming out soon. The last one is up on the screen. One last thing, I made a community Discord. There's a link in the description down below if you want to join, and I just wanted another place for you guys to talk about the cards from the series. I'll be posting certain cards and asking for feedback for future episodes, and I'd love to see some of the cards that you create. It's been a pleasure as always, and until next time, ta-ta.